and I represent Frigg. Frigg is a brand for women that you can actually see on the table in the kitchen area. I'm also representing This Is Our Dream, which is a social equity accelerator. Many of the mentees who graduate in our last cohort also have their brands in the kitchen, so please go and check those brands out. We are doing the takeover by FlowerHire at Hall of Flowers, and we are in this beautiful James Bond house. What a treat to be here, and a treat to have this conversation with Chris Ball, who, you know, I'm not gonna even do the traditional intro. I have a special treat for you. I wrote a little something something, and by wrote, I read, took it off the internet. It's the same. Okay, here it goes. Daniel's son. Boy, oh boy, if you ever get a chance to buy some of this, please take a seat, because you're gonna feel like you're 3 rounds in with Daniel LaRusso himself. This is such a beautiful plant, and the smoke has that aroma that makes you keep wanting to take a puff. Save a little bit of your paycheck for this stuff. Literally anything that the Ball Family Farms produces is straight gas, ranging from Bruce Leroy to Laura Charles. Their new batches of weed are guaranteed to give you a nice head change. It's like a face kick, but for Daniel LaRusso, it is so gassy and dense and packs the perfect punch of flavor and white ash as you smoke it. It also pays homage to the fictional character from the Karate Kid series. Much love, Fire and Gas. That's a review.
That's pretty awesome.
That is a review.
I was scared when you first started reading this shit. I'm like, hold on, this is a compliment session? What the fuck?
That is a review, and so now I want to know, how does someone get reviews like that? I want to hear about how the story of you and also the brand, which a lot of people might not know, but really pays homage to the Karate Kid. Many of the stray names are based on those characters, and I think your journey is similar in the hero's journey. So I wanted you to take the floor and kind of share that sort of journey with us.
For sure. My journey in cannabis started when I was, my entrepreneurial journey started when I was 16. You know, my first experience with it is probably when I was about 10, and it was known around my house as, you know, the funny smelling cigarettes my dad would smoke. You know, I understood what regular cigarettes were because my mom smoked them. But my dad's cigarettes were just smaller, and he never got them from the store. He would get them from like under the couch on this tray, and he'd like be picking shit out of them, and then he'd roll up these little joints. So that was like my first, you know, experience, you know, intro. And, you know, I'm an 80s baby, you know, so I was born in 77. So I grew up in the Reagan era where it was the Just Say No campaign, you know. And so as a young guy.
We have that in common.
Absolutely.
We have that
cut from a different cloth.
Yes.
We're real. So anyway, I would, you know, go to school, and I would see the Just Say No campaigns, and then I'd go home, and then I would see everyone I loved, you know, grandma, mom, not actually my mom, my grandma, my dad, my uncles, my cousins, they would all be partaking in this dad's funny smelling cigarettes, right? So for me, it just became a part of our culture, part of my culture. When I turned 16, you know, my cousin Earl was a neighborhood weed guy, and cousin Earl was super fresh all the time, right?
I love that name, Earl.
Earl,
of course.
cousin Earl. So I was, you know, not really into that kind of thing at that age. I was more into sports and girls and, you know, typical shit a 16-year-old would be into. But, you know, cousin Earl was fresh, so I asked cousin Earl to hook me up with my first ounce of weed and teach me how to sell it. So he did, but I was pretty terrible at it. You know, I think I probably sold like half of it to the stoners at lunchtime, and the other half I probably fucking gave away, right? So I just kind of put it down. I was like, this ain't for me. Once I turned 18, I was graduating from high school, and, you know, my parents had that conversation, that tough conversation. You know, you got to go to school or you got to work. You know, which one is it going to be? I wasn't ready to go into the workforce. So, you know, my dad was like, well, you got to get your ass out of here. You know, you're 18 now. So I moved out, and I enrolled in a junior college, Mount Sac Junior College in Walnut, California. And at that point, I called my cousin Earl back, and I said, yo, you know, I need you to hook me up with another ounce, because, you know, my parents couldn't afford to send me to school. I didn't have any athletic scholarships or anything like that at that time. And at this point, I knew like the stakes were higher for me. I was like, if I don't make this work, you know, I'm gonna be working at UPS or whatever the hell it's gonna be.
Yep.
So enrolled in Mount Sac, cousin Earl hooked me up with another ounce of weed, and this time I made it work. I took it very serious, and it's the way I like paid my tuition. I put gas in my little Volkswagen Bug, put, you know, Jordans on my feet. You know, I was able to buy me some Jordans and shit, some clean shit at that point. You know what I mean? And I did that, you know, for 2 years until I got my football scholarship to Berkeley, you know? And so at that point, you know, I kind of fell in love with the process of being a middleman, you know, trying to find the best weed and being able to sell that weed, you know, for a profit and put money in my pocket. I just fell in love with the game. Went to college, put it down, you know, spent some time, graduated from college, played some ball with the Niners, you know, got moved over, went to NFL Europe, played a year over there, came back from Europe, didn't get picked up back in the NFL, but signed a contract to go play in the CFL in Canada, British Columbia. When I got to British Columbia in Vancouver, this is where I got bit by the cultivation bug. I had never seen weed grown before up until that point. I was just a middleman, right? Get it from Cousin Earl, sell it to this fool, get my money, I'm out.
And what was the energy in like? Were you disappointed? Was this a good thing? Like, what? No, where were you mentally in that?
It was a great thing, because when I first saw the process, right? When one of the Canadians, you know, on the team had a grow, you know, so he knew that I was from LA. We all know who messes with weed and who don't, you know. So when he brought me and a couple of the homies over to the grow, I was just like, yo. And for me to watch that process from clone to veg to bloom to harvest, I just kind of fell in love with the whole process. And then hearing the margins, like, you know, when he told me what the margin was, he's like, yo, I'm like, how much are you spending to do this? Oh, I'll be like $500 a pound. I was like, what?
That's not what I'm making.
So I'm like doing the math in my head, like, hold up, 500. So in the off season, I won't get into exactly how we did it, right? Because I'm pretty sure there's still guys in Canada doing this shit, right? So
we'll circle
I don't
back.
want to mess it up for them. But in the off season, us football players who, you know, were from like California and LA, you know, where the Mecca was, we would supplement our income by like packing up our car and trafficking the weed from up there.
Football players.
Yeah, okay. Trafficking the weed. You know, we had a pass. You know, we were football guys, right? So I would buy the weed up there, $800, come down to California, to LA, to my hood, sell it for $3,500. You know what I mean? So I'm killing, right? Yeah. It got to the point to where I started making more money doing that than I was actually making money playing football.
That point.
Right? So I did that for a couple years. I wound up getting traded out of Vancouver and having to go over to Hamilton, Ontario. So that's the East Coast. So now the game is, you know, I'm not there anymore. I have to play from over there. But I still had like my connections, right? After my first year in Hamilton, came back to LA, and I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna just stay here and do this. You know, so once I started doing that, and I was already popular in LA because I became known as the football player with the packs for the low. I was able to undercut the market because I was getting it so cheap from Canada. Well, I did that, you know, for a few years until I attracted the attention of the federal government. You know, at that point, I had just become just too well known out there in the streets, and I touched a prominent cartel, not knowing that I touched them through somebody else. And, you know, in 2010, the feds came knocking at my door and had a nice indictment for me. You know, so that happened in 2010. I go in, you know, I'm looking at a 10-year mandatory minimum. I'm like, what? I had never been in trouble with the law ever in my life. I'm not more than a speeding ticket. So the DEA agents and everyone was like, look, man, we know your history. We know this is not you, you know, but you did touch these people. So, you know, just plead out for what you did. We know we got you on this, we got you on that, and then, you know, it'll be that. So I did that and I pled out. They wound up giving me 30 months, you know, a 3-year sentence. Worked out a little deal with my attorney, you know, I signed my deal, got out on pretrial release. My lawyer worked out a deal to where I didn't have to report for my 3 years until the case was over, right?
Got it, okay.
So during that time, like number 1 through 5 on the case, I don't know if anyone's familiar with indictments, but like there was like a 14-man indictment. So like everybody has to go through the court system or whatever. That went on for about 4 years. And in that 4 years, I worked. So I came out.
Sorry, so for 30 months.
So I signed for 30 months.
It took you 4 years.
I was in prison for about a month before I was able to bail out. My little brother, Chuck, who's the CFO of my company, put up his condo to get me out, right?
Wow.
So when I'm out, when I signed my deal, my lawyer structured the deal saying Chris doesn't have to report for his 3 years until the entire case, everyone is done and sentenced. right? And the strategy behind that is that if the number one on the case gets 5 years, well, Chris was number 14, he got too much time. Let's negotiate that,
Got
right?
it.
So, but that went on for 4 years. So at that point, I worked at Abercrombie and Fitch for 2 years. Pretty fucking embarrassing. 32
Why did you pick Abercrombie and Fitch?
You know what? Just because I...
Of all the places.
Okay, first of all, I didn't pick them. They picked me. I was walking through the fucking mall, and some fucking lady girl walks up to me and goes, "Hey, do you want a job at Abercrombie?" Right? So I'm like, "Fuck, I need a job." Yeah. Right? So, but I wound up, working there for 2 years, and then I was headhunted. I guess I helped someone from Nike in Abercrombie, and then they wound up calling me and then gave me a job in Las Vegas working for Nike. So after the 4 years was up, I had been, paying my taxes. I was a rehabilitated citizen, if you will, right? So when I went back to report for sentencing when the case was over, the judge gave me time served, right? Yep. And I fucking walked out. Don't ask me why, but a month later, my ass quit Nike and said I want to go back to LA and get back into cannabis and marijuana.
What year was this?
This was in 2014.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Now, there was a couple things that happened, right, that made me think of that, right? I knew working in corporate America that it just wasn't for me. I'm an ex-athlete, street guy. I didn't really understand corporate America. It was cool, and I worked for a great company. I got to talk football and wear tennis shoes every day to work, but just the culture and the camaraderie of corporate America just ain't for me, right? I'm just a different breed, right? So I was like, fuck this, I don't want to do this. I want to go back and control my own destiny, right? So I came back to LA, my family was pissed, my brother was pissed, everybody told me I was stupid. I knew if I got caught that I was going to go back to prison and do 3 years, no questions asked, because the judge told me that when he gave me time served. It would be my second offense.
And this is the brother who leveraged his condo to get you out. Okay.
Yes. So he's furious. He's like, "Oh, you're fucking ungrateful. Like, why would you do this? Like, you're stupid." He's the CFO of the company now. He's doing real well. Okay? We'll get to that later. Okay. So I came back down to LA and I bought a 14 light grow in Van Nuys, California. It was a guy, one of my boys who owed me a little bit of money from the past. He had the grow, and I was like, "Fuck it. I'm gonna take what I learned what I learned in Canada, and I'm gonna just try to do this myself instead of coming back and buying weed and having to deal with other people." I felt like that's what got me in trouble in the first place. And when you go to prison, you learn, how the law works. You learn how the feds work. At least I did. I studied my case. I studied other cases. And so I was just like, you know what? I think I know how to do this time without them, fucking with me, you know? And I knew that there was the Prop D compliance situation in LA, and I knew I had a lot of boys who owned these shops. So I was like, if I can just figure out how to grow, I can just go talk to my friends and be like, "Yo, buy weed off me and let me, get it into your co-op." So that's what I did. I came out, and from 2014 to 2015, I really just burnt up plants. That first year, I couldn't get through it. I didn't really know what the fuck I was doing. And if anybody knows about growing, you're not gonna get it in your first year. You're just not, right? But after a few years, something finally clicked. I got it. I started getting my brand, into these Prop D compliant shops until in 2018 or 17, one of my business partners told me about the social equity program in LA. I didn't fucking believe it. I was like, there's no way they're gonna give a felon like myself a license to do this. But after I investigated it, it was real. I applied. Ball Family Farms was born.
I love that, and that's really good timing. We have a few more minutes. I know that ran super fast, but talk to me specifically about what was good about the social equity experience for you, but more importantly, what you think an ideal scenario would be. There's a lot of entrepreneurs in this audience. There's a lot of us who have social equity licenses in this space. And there's pros and cons. So can you talk through how you navigated that, and specifically the money? Yeah,
okay. Well, I'll do it quick, right? The money came from my shoebox money, the money that I had been collecting from growing and selling weed to these Prop D compliant shops.
So an alternative channel of investment.
There was, So I had been saving a bunch of money. So that's how I was able to, get the money up to go pay my licensing fees with the social equity license and all of that kind of stuff. But what I don't like, the social equity program.
And what was the total of that?
That was $36,000. Okay. Right? To build my spot was close to $1 million. Okay. But we didn't do it all at once, right? We did one room at a time. I had the space, and we put 30 grand I spent 36 grand for my licensing fees, and then I spent another 30 grand to build this room out. And then once we harvested that room and was able to sell that product, we took the profits and built out another room. So we kind of grassrooted it, you know, one room at a time. The problem with the social equity program, though, is that it's broken, right? And so it's like when I got my football scholarship to Berkeley. Had Berkeley just given me the scholarship, but didn't give me a place to live, didn't give me financial aid, didn't give me priority registration, didn't give me access to tutors, I would have flunked out of school, right? Because I'm an inner city kid, I'm at a higher institution of higher learning, and I don't really know how to navigate, you know what I mean, those things. So they have to give me the resources to be able to do that. Social equity program does not do that. Had it not been for my past and, you know, me starting at 16 and going into rooms and not the guy not buying my pack of weed because it ain't the best pack of weed in there, and then me figuring out why mine ain't the best pack, right? And then going to my grow and burning up shit for a year and making every mistake you could possibly make until I finally got good at it. Those are the reasons why I'm successful, right? So it was a little bit of my illicit market, you know, strategy and me being smart enough to save my bread. And then it was the experience I had in knowing the consumer and the culture of cannabis and what the consumer wants. What's the difference between a good indica and a bad indica? You know, what's the difference between some weed that burns your throat and some weed that doesn't? What's the difference between white ash and gray ash? You know, PGRs, plant growth regulators, all these things I had to learn from failing.
And I think that's an interesting point because you had the capital to fail versus a lot of social equity applicants. It really feels as if you have that one shot.
Yeah, and you're not gonna make it. You're not gonna make it. If they get one shot, they're not gonna make it. So that's why, you know, you see the social equity program not working. You see a lot of these other privileged cultures coming in and exercising predatory practices on these social equity applicants because they can. You know, the social equity applicant doesn't know any better. Your social equity, what does that mean? You're low income, you've been disenfranchised by the war on drugs, you're probably not educated. I'm like the unicorn, right? I just so happen to have an education. I just so happen to have illicit market money that I was able to use to start my company and then turn it legit.
So how do we change that, and how do we sort of think about that? Because what's interesting is that there was a study that was recently done with Ease that showed that consumers will pay a premium for social equity brands more than any other factor. And so we live in an industry and a society that wants to support.
Wants to help.
And not only that, it sort of represents actual culture. So I was just at the Gorilla RX opening down in Crenshaw, and this is completely anecdotal, but it seemed as if it was driving people who had never stepped into a dispensary before. And it was bringing in a consumer because we know in California that the majority of products sold are still black market. And so if by investing in social equity brands, I know I can charge a premium, I know that my customer wants to see that representation, and I know that maybe they'll go from the guy from Cousin Earl and they'll actually walk into a dispensary and buy me just because of who I am. That's powerful in a market as crazy and a shit show as California when you have those levers. So knowing all those facts, like what are tangible ways that we can fix it or work it?
My favorite way, if I could talk to the DCR and the BCC and I could give them some fucking advice, right? I would tell them, you need to take guys like myself who actually are social equity applicants and actually know the horror of trying to get through this application process, trying to get a grow, trying to get all these things, right? You should take a person like myself and give me, incentivize me. Give me a tax break. Okay, Chris, if you go out and you incubate these 3 social equity applicants, we're gonna cut your taxes down to here. Get them up and running. Show them the way, mentor them, right? So that the social equity program can work, so that we can create more business owners in your culture and in your arena, right? If they would do something like that, you would see more guys like myself. I would try to do it myself right now, but I can't. I'm overwhelmed with the bullshit that I have to go through with the state myself, right? And trying to keep my own business afloat. But if they were to tell me something like that, then I could bring 2 social equity applicants in and incubate them. You know what I'm saying? Okay, here's how you go about getting your building permits. Here's how you go about, let's go talk to your landlord. Let's work out a situation here. I can even loan you some money from over here that we can figure that out later when you get your stuff up and running. Here's some genetics, okay? Here's some growing mediums. You know what I'm saying? Like any of those things would help, right? The other way is just release the budget. There needs to be a fucking budget. How do you expect social equity applicants to start a business when they have no financial aid? Who can start a business with no fucking money?
Yeah.
right? And no education and no consulting, any of those things. So the first thing would, put the proper resources in place, give these social equity applicants a chance to be successful, right? And then and after that, go out and find other successful social equity applicants and incentivize them by helping bring the other ones along. Each one teach one.
I really like that power of sort of community, because that seems to be the ethos of your brand. I read in the LA Times that about 80% of your company is people of color.
Absolutely.
And so that's one way that social equity sort of like it plays in its own community, that dollar gets cycled back. And so that's an impact that's
absolutely
important too. But if you could sort of, this question I want to give you is really about, it seems like the through line of your stories was community and the people around you, even before we started. Whether that was your family and the legacy that you're trying to build, or like your customers. So can we talk a little bit about community and culture? Because I think culture, sometimes we throw it out, but like I don't think a lot of people really know what that means. And a lot of people are faking it. And so like how do we, because it's the thing, when you know it, you see it. But like how, like what does it mean to you? What does community mean to you?
I mean, it's everything to me, right? I mean, you can tell by the way my brand looks and how it feels, right? Even down to my strain names of my strains, right? It's all about culture. My strains are named after movies that inspired me, heroes that inspired me as a kid. The culture of cannabis, and what people will realize, and they're starting to realize, but it will become a lot more evident, is that if you don't got the culture, you don't have a customer base. Right? If you don't understand weed, you do not understand cannabis, if you do not understand smoke and how it's supposed to make somebody feel, you don't understand phenols and strains and all of those things, your company's gonna go belly up. I don't give a fuck how many millions of dollars you have put into it. You will get the first buy, but your customer won't return, right? Because the medicine is not doing what it's supposed to do. And if you're just gonna put a bunch of shit weed in pretty packaging, you can try that too. Everyone's trying that too, right? And figuring out that shit don't work, right? So when I first found my first strain, it took us probably almost a year and some change to find Daniel LaRusso, right? We kept getting them out. Nope, this ain't it. Nope, this ain't it. Nope, this ain't it, right? And then when I finally got the one, and I don't smoke, right?
That is what I was going to ask you next, is that
I don't smoke. And the reason why I was able to do that, it was because I understand my culture, right? I've been selling weed since I was 16. So I know who are weed connoisseurs around me. I know bougie weed smokers who don't like anything, right? So I took my weed and I gave it to 5 of those bougie weed smokers. I knew exactly where to find them. Here, smoke this. And when they all unanimously said, that's the one, then Daniel LaRusso was born.
I love that. You had said that you could look at a bud and know what type of nutrients was used. Give me one of the best tips. So let's just say I have a nug here. What is the first thing that you're looking for? Give me 2 things that I need to know.
The first thing I'm gonna look for is the size of the bud.
Okay, what size do I need?
You need, prime example. Do you remember what chicken used to look like, or steak, like 20 years ago?
Like big?
No, like small.
Small.
Remember when they were small?
Like regular size.
Remember when chicken legs were like probably like this big, and now you see them, they're like this fucking big, and they're like that. That cow has been pumped with a lot of shit to get more money out of it. Okay. Right? The same thing with weed. When you see a bud and the bud is this big, that means there was plant growth regulators. That means it was genetically infused to make the bud bigger. So the first thing I'm gonna look for is a bud like this big, right? Something very small. And I'm gonna look at the structure of it. Does it have a bunch of orange hairs popping out of it? If it has a bunch of orange hairs and it's not, the pheno does not call for that, for orange to be in it, that means that the plant was stressed out, right?
I love the passion for this, right? Like this is his craft. I appreciate you sharing that. I'm gonna take those 2 notes. And so here's how I would love to, I wanna know, like, what do you want the future of cannabis to be for you, but also for the community at large?
The main thing I want cannabis to be for me and my family is I wanna create a brand that's a household name that the consumer can rely on, right? Kind of like Coca-Cola, right? Maybe not that big. Let's take it back. Maybe like a Lagunitas beer, right? I don't want to be Anheuser-Busch, but I want to be a quality brand that the consumer can always depend on and know whatever they put out is always quality and it's always fire. And I want to be able to get my eyes on every part of my grow in my establishment. I never want my grow to the point to where I can't see what's going on over in Michigan and I have some random grower growing my shit over in Florida. That will never be Ball Family Farms. We are doing, it's taking us 3 years to expand into Oklahoma, and that's because I am training here and then I'm deploying my team so that Daniel LaRusso tastes the same in LA and in Oklahoma. And then when I get more staff, it will go over to Michigan. However that's gonna be, right? That's the legacy I wanna leave with my brand personally. As far as cannabis is concerned, I think cannabis, once the federal legalization happens, right, and the ban is lifted, I believe the research and development dollars will come into the space, and then the entire world will see just how good this plant is, and it will change Western medicine. I believe opioids will come out of Western medicine and cannabis will be inserted in. And at that point, I hope my company is to a place to where we can participate in that so that we can help kids with Tourette's, or we can help cancer patients, we can help AIDS patients, we can help, kids who are having seizures, kids with pancreatic cancer. I want it to go that direction, and I strongly and I really do believe it will go that direction once those R&D dollars are put into the space. Right now, because of the federal ban, we don't have it. So people still have a stigma about what this plant does, but it's really a miracle drug. It's really a miracle medicine. It should, if we can do this with alcohol, and cheers, because I like my beer, I think cannabis is gonna do way more wonders, for the world and for the health of the world.
For the health and the wealth.
And the health and the wealth.
The
And
health
I hope
and the
to
wealth.
be right there on the wealth side.
Same. Well, we'll wrap it there. Thank you, everyone.